Hello, and welcome back to the MTOP series. This is the fourth series in our economic business tax amendments in the city of Yes. Our first two series we had, the first one was how did this all happen? Who were the main players? Where did the ideas come from of the city of Yes? The second was the actual process. What is the actual process that happens in order to make these changes into law? The third one, we just started on the weeds, getting into the weeds of these text amendments. And we started with manufacturing, and we just talked about how the manufacturing zones, manufacturing businesses will now be able to come into commercial corridors and inside residential districts, right where people live, where there once were separated. But this one is actually like part two of the manufacturing because it continues with the manufacturing issue. And because people keep wondering why do all of a sudden corporations and big businessmen want to endanger the welfare of the public by putting manufacturing businesses inside of residential communities? And the question is land. It's always about land. And we're going to help you finish that analysis. And we call this freeing the manufacturing developers endgame. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, so before we start talking about the manufacturing, that portion, we want to just talk about DCP, the administrative discretionary actions. A lot of agencies have what you call administrative discretionary actions. And those is basically things that that agency can do without any oversight. So they don't have to get approval from the city council. It's just within their discretion. And a lot of these new text amendments that are allowing for the first time things to happen, instead of it going through the ULA process where there's a little checks and balances because the city council balances the mayor because the mayor kind of controls the agencies. He chooses the head of the agencies. You could fire people if you don't like what they say. So the city council is the balancing of the mayor. And so normally when it comes to zoning issues, normally these things go through the ULA process where there's a balancing, right? The mayor gets a say, pushes and supports an initiative, and the city council gets to balance that initiative with their votes. And sometimes what the mayor wants, he doesn't get. And sometimes what the city council wants, they don't get. But in this case, they are allowing all these new things to happen without the city council being involved in it, without the community board's involvement. They're doing this under administrative discretionary actions. And which means that this really being controlled by the mayor, because the mayor controls the city planning commission because it chooses a majority of their commission members. And it controls the Department of City Planning. So one of the changes that are happening, and that would be from an administrative discretionary action instead of a land use action where, again, the city council and the community can weigh in and there'll be some balance, is in the manufacturing districts. So as all of those businesses that were now used to reside in the manufacturing districts now will be leaving, right? Because now they can leave out of the manufacturing districts and go all over the city, right? Into all these commercial corridors and everywhere. So you're going to have all this free space. So one of the discretionary actions that they are proposing is, as long as it hasn't turned residential, as long as it's still commercial and manufacturing, they want to be able to bypass the ULIP process, don't ask the community, don't ask the city council. They want to change the modifications of buildings. They want to be able to change what we call the bulk of a building. So, and that means, how the building is built. We have a lot of regulations that make buildings built in a certain way. Like you have to have setbacks so that you won't create these massive shadows on the sidewalk. You can't build right up to the property line. You can't build right up to the property line. You need some grass and greenery around, and other types of structures, so you don't have these big, bulky kind of monstrosities. Well, now all of those types of changes, which normally go through a land use review process, will now be discretionary. And some of these changes could actually include unlimited heights. So now you have the manufacturing zones, you have the developers in there that own the land that would be able to go to, the city planning department, just ask for these changes, which more than likely they will get, because this is the Department of City Planning's plan, right? Based upon the mayor's plan. And then you would change all of these parameters of the building. And then what will happen? Well, now that you can build whatever you want to build, the way that you want to build it to maximize your profit without having to consider the effects on the environment or how it looks or how the community experiences it. They don't have to worry about shadows or anything like that. Well, we propose that the housing tax amendments will come along and allow developers to convert those special districts into housing districts. And so you have now bypassed the entire ULURP process by allowing developers to reshape how they're going to build buildings, allow them to convert to residential, and boom, now you have massive amounts of residential inside of those manufacturing zones. Now we're just going to put all of this process together. And who would be the most affected by this? By those massive amounts of manufacturing businesses now leaving the manufacturing zones and going into the communities. Well, the communities of color, of course, because that's the first place that the manufacturing zones are going to go to, the manufacturing businesses. Why? Because their commercial space will be the cheapest. So if you own property in a manufacturing zone, and all of a sudden you're given the opportunity to relocate that property and then free up that land so that you can develop it or sell it to a developer. Well, you want to keep your business. So where are you going to go? Well, you're going to go into the Black communities, right? You're going to go into the poor communities. You're going to go into the communities that have the least political power and also have the cheapest land. And so now we're going to be stuck with, and this is why the policy is prejudiced and racist against communities of color, because now those communities will be even more vulnerable because you'll be bringing in these toxic manufacturing businesses that are harmful to people. You have not upgraded, which we discussed in the previous video, you have not upgraded the standards, and they're going to be thrown into Black communities and communities of color that don't have as much political power, where, inspections and all kinds of stuff don't happen. And you'll also find an increase in problems in those communities, which already have the highest rates of, asthma and the high rates of depression and people die earlier. So you're already taking a vulnerable population and you're going to incentivize that population to even be more vulnerable because you're going to be driving those manufacturing businesses out of the manufacturing areas into the cheap land that's contained inside of Black communities, communities of color, right? But do not think that white communities are not going to feel this, because they will feel this. Why? And we're about to tell you why. Take this map. This is a zoning map of CB1 in Staten Island. You look at all of that purple. There's this purple that tinges. I'm going to put my arrow around here. This purple that tinges. You see the M3s and M1s and M2s and M. These are all manufacturing districts. Look at this M3. All manufacturing districts. Once you remove all of those manufacturing businesses out of the manufacturing districts, what do you have? You have land along the water, waterfronts. You have land along the water. And now that the text amendments have allowed you to change the bulk of how you can build those buildings, right, to maximize the profit of now they don't have to do setbacks, and they don't, don't have to, they can build up to the property line. They don't have to consider, light air between the buildings, because their zoning now says that they can convert it to residential. And here comes the residential development projects all along this. But it's just not in Staten Island. And I just happened to stumble upon this. You look at New York City with these maps, you will see a lot of manufacturing businesses along these waterfronts. But let me just give you another example. So this is in Staten Island. This is basically Community Board 1. But let me give you the next one. This is in Brooklyn Heights, an even more sought after community for development. And this is right here. Again, if you see my arrow, this is all along waterfront in Brooklyn Heights. All manufacturing, M2s, M1s, M2s, M1s, a lot of manufacturing. Once you remove all of those businesses, you're going to have little cities popping up in those areas. Some of these special districts will be without height limits, okay? Which they got from the text amendments. These text amendments, right? The economic text amendments will allow them to develop buildings. Right now, they're only commercial and manufacturing without height limits. But once they get converted to residential without height limits, boy, oh boy, what are you going to see? You're going to see a major transformation in communities as these development projects move forward. And that really is the end game when it comes to the manufacturing. It's not so that these small businesses will be able to, expand their business and put a bakery, that's not it. Because what are you actually doing? You have these small businesses sitting there on these commercial corridors, and then you're going to allow the manufacturing businesses to come and compete with the small businesses. Well, guess what's going to happen to the small businesses? If they got to compete against manufacturing businesses, the small businesses are going to get driven out. And the manufacturing businesses are the ones who are going to dominate because they could pay that much more money. And there will be an incentive for them to do that, because they will then be, loosening up and making, the manufacturing areas now available for development. And so you're actually going to be doing the opposite of what you said you were going to do. And that is to support small businesses by actually driving up the rents and making small businesses lead out of those commercial corridors as manufacturing businesses come in. And you'll probably see that the most in communities of color, to the point that we might not even have businesses any longer that actually cater to our needs. Those small little bodegas and the small little clothing shops and, the small little, 5 and dime stores, gone. And in its place, manufacturing. So these are really serious conditions that we're setting up to happen. And, we'll have to see how that works. But, if they had done a study, obviously, they would probably have been able to predict that, because it's not rocket science when you allow a competing industry to now, compete against, stores, an entity that's also much more expensive. Then of course, you're going to diminish your small business and let the manufacturing dominate that industry or commercial quarters. Okay, well, that's it for that particular segment. This is our 4th segment. We want to remind you that there is a January 24th, 2024 public hearing by the City Planning Commission. And hopefully you'll be able to make that. It's in person and also via Zoom or on the web somehow. There's also a press conference, same day, 1 p.m. in person at 130 Broadway, right down the block and on the same side as the Department of City Planning. So please come out and join us for that. And lastly, we would just want lastly, we would like to just tell you about us, MTOP. MTOP is the Movement to Protect the People. We've been around for about 10 years. We're located in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Flatbush. Our main focus is on rezonings. We've studied the text amendments and we've done a lot of literature on it. So you're welcome to go to our website at www.mtop.org and check out all of the materials that have links to the current text amendment proposals as well as the existing laws. You're welcome to look at our other videos that we are posting on there as we move along, or you're welcome to call us if you have any questions, 718-703-3086. And I just would like to give out a shout out. I haven't done this. I would like to give out a shout out to Nicola Cox, who's helping with this recording. Okay, well, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Bye.